Welcome back to another Startup Junkies podcast. Whether you are tuning in over your radio, over your phone, through the video, we appreciate it. Be sure to like, subscribe, do all that super fun stuff, and share us wherever possible. To check in on the Startup Junkies podcast weekly. My name is Davis McEntire, joined here by my two co-hosts, Jeff Amerine, Caleb Talley. How you guys doing?
It's a beautiful day in paradise.
Yeah, glad to be here. Didn't get hit by lightning, so it's all good.
We've had some pretty crazy weather, so yeah, thankfully we're here. All the recording instruments are working fine. Well, I'm honored to introduce our guest today, Rishi Mittal. He's an entrepreneur through and through and has founded Mycelium Networks here in Northwest Arkansas, which deploys and operates decentralized wireless networks. Rishi, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, start us off with kind of your origin story. How'd you get started?
Yeah. So I guess let's go back about 10 years. I was a finance and accounting double major out of school. Worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers for a couple of years doing audit work. Worked with a couple of Fortune 500 companies. Got to see some pretty cool stuff from an accounting perspective, but my interest has always been in economics and investing, more on the finance side. So I'd worked a couple of years with PwC, and I was home actually in my mom's kitchen. And one of my brother's friends named Scott reached out to me. I thought it was kind of weird because Scott was a real techie guy, a real tech geek. And he was actually working as an Apple genius down the street. And he said he wanted to meet with me to run this concept past me. This program or this project. And I said, it's kind of peculiar, but let's do it. I sat down with him and we spent a couple of hours talking about this new thing that he had discovered. And from his perspective, he had already checked out the tech. He had already verified it. It was good on his end. What he wanted to know was, does it test out economically? Is it viable? Is it sound as a system? And so he wanted to run it past me because that's kind of where my interest was. And I was completely hooked 2 hours into talking about it. And what he had spent 2 hours explaining to me was this quirky little thing called Bitcoin. From an economic side, I was really, really intrigued because for once it was this super simplified system of measurement that was based on mineral extraction, something really simple that we could all kind of grasp, kind of like, in the early days of going out west, you could literally pull gold out of the ground with a shovel.
Right.
And over time, it got more and more difficult to extract. And eventually you had specialized machinery that you needed in order to extract it. And you were extracting less and less. And Bitcoin as an economic system was really designed on this mineral extraction and that type of a system. So I understood it immediately. And in my mind, it kind of changed everything. Studying finance, studying economics, reading the Wall Street Journal, I understood how central banks operated. I understood how fiat economies were designed and the buttons and the levers that you could pull in order to manage the system. But Bitcoin and this scarcity system seemed so much more basic and so much more efficient. And all of a sudden, there was this network of computers decentralized all over the globe that managed and maintain the system as opposed to having a central authority or, a meeting behind closed doors to do that. So I spent the next couple of weeks just completely hooked, digging into everything. And I went back to Scott and I said, this is amazing. Let's do it. I don't even know what we're doing, but let's do it. How do we get some of this Bitcoin? And he said, okay, so we can either buy it or we can mine it or make it. And I said, well, let's do that. So what we did was, I decided that I would, I worked for a couple of years, had a little bit of money, not a whole lot, but I said, all right, I'll buy the equipment. So we went on to tigerdirect.com, spent $600 on some basic computer equipment. And it was just a CPU. There was no GPU, which you need now in order to mine Bitcoin and other coins like that. But a $600 bare bones system. And I told Scott he was going to have to build it. I would buy it and he would build it. Sure enough, a week later, the parts came, we built it. It looked like you would buy a computer and it all got busted up on transport. It was literally just spread out on an open table, connected with wires and a big box fan, just trying to push air, sitting on top of it. It really looked terrible. But it was up and running and we were mining Bitcoin. So a few weeks went by and every now and then the system would shut off. We had to reboot it. After about 2 months, he called me one day and he said, man, I got to shut the machine off. I said, why? Everything's been going great. He said, well, my mom's threatening to kick me out of the house. We were running this system in her basement. And he said the power bill came in for this month. It was $300. And he said the other power bill is already $300, for the next month. And so he said, we have to shut it down. I'm not getting kicked out of the house. I said, okay, we have an issue here. We can't let you get kicked out of the house, but we got to figure this out. So we added up, the economic side of things, and we had $600 in equipment that we had spent. We got $600 in power bills. Yeah. And this is 2011. All right. So the price of Bitcoin is $12. Well, we had mined 20 Bitcoin. So if you do the math, it's $240 worth of Bitcoin and $1,200 worth of expenses. So something wasn't adding up, and so we made a deal. And Scott would work some extra hours at the Apple store. He would pay me my $600 back. He would keep the computer parts and keep the Bitcoin. So I would walk away whole. Scott would walk away with the Bitcoin.
Gee, that's a great deal.
Right, absolutely. So, today that 20 Bitcoin is worth a little under $1 million. And so it's a pretty interesting story. But I was pretty happy about it because, I was made whole. I learned about Bitcoin. I learned about this, how to start a venture. Even though it was a real small one, it only lasted a couple of months. But it really kind of opened my eyes to the entire process. A lot of people ask, what did he end up doing with that Bitcoin? But then, I kind of like to ask back, it's like, what do you think I did with that $600? So that's how I kind of got started with everything.
That's how you got the taste.
Did you buy a Domino's pizza? Wow.
Yeah. That experience really just kind of stayed with me, even though our venture ended right then. I understood the implications of what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency could really have, and particularly blockchain. And it was kind of one of those experiences where if you've, lived your life by candlelight for 20, 25 years, and then somebody shows you how a light bulb works, you can't just forget that. And, maybe we hadn't figured out all the things that we were going to do with that light bulb at the time, but you just knew the power that was with that. So fast forward about 10 years, here we are, and, we're still doing stuff on blockchain.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's so interesting. That's a great origin story. I think probably one of the better ones we've had.
Yeah, it's great. And it's relevant too with all that's going on with blockchain, crypto, NFTs, and Web 3.0 in general. But so bring us up to speed on tell us more about Mycelium and how you got into that.
Yeah. So if we fast forward a little bit, but we go back to summer of 2020, kind of COVID summer, pandemic lockdowns. Everybody was at home for the first time. I realized, okay, this is what summer's going to be. It's going to be a pretty stay-at-home type of summer. And so I decided that I would build a rock patio at my house. And in retrospect, that was a terrible decision because I had no idea how much work would go into it, but I decided I would do that by myself. But, going outside and laying rocks and everything in between, at some point during the summer, I caught myself running back inside and doing more and more research on this project called Helium. And Helium is a decentralized network, protocol based on blockchain. And it really kind of brought me back, learning more about Helium. It brought me back to that same feeling I had when I first learned about Bitcoin. It was kind of that aha, this changes everything. If this works, the whole world changes. It was that feeling, and I really hadn't had that feeling in about 10 years. So it was hard to shake that, and I kept on coming back to it. And really what Helium promised compared to Bitcoin is a way of successfully transferring and registering and accounting for units of measurement, monetary value. And Helium really promised to do that same thing with information, to truly decentralize information. And it was a completely different approach to applying blockchain to literally radio frequency transmission. And so I kind of looked at that as like a 3D version. If Bitcoin was to money, Helium would be that to information. And I kind of couldn't get it out of my head. If this works, it really changes everything. We could really create a new type of internet architecture. So one thing led to another, and I jumped in and purchased a bunch of units, and we started deploying them all around Northwest Arkansas and setting up our own IoT network. And IoT is really, it's a new kind of a technology. It's been around for a long time, but being applied to blockchain, it's a completely new way of approaching it. And, we've all heard of the information superhighway, as it's been referred to the internet since the very beginning, AOL Prodigy days. And really what we've done is we've built and built and built on top of that. And it's really an information super interstate now. It's gotten faster and faster, and all of our information is traveling over it. And the best way to look at IoT is we're really trying to build an information super sidewalk, something on the side where we don't need that high bandwidth, those real-time streaming applications, FaceTime and everything. But we do need to send reliable information over long distances. And for that, you can use something kind of like a dedicated sidewalk for smaller bandwidth items. And so we really set out to start building this in Northwest Arkansas. We were the first ones to bring helium to Northwest Arkansas. It started with about 15 to 20 deployed gateways or nodes that we had kind of set around Fayetteville. And now we've got over 250 hosts, residences, businesses who are helping host our hardware and supporting this network. And really one of the largest, densest networks in the entire country, especially considering population with over 1,000 nodes in the area. So we've got one of the best networks in the United States to be deploying and testing IoT solutions. And so out of that kind of sprung Mycelium Networks. We were deploying this network and my passion for blockchain and cryptocurrency and this whole decentralized world. I really kind of felt like this was a great opportunity to establish a platform and an organization that supported that. And so the mission of Mycelium Networks is to accelerate the world's adoption of decentralized networks. And we started with helium. We're starting in Northwest Arkansas, and we're just going to take it from there.
The Arkansas Inc. podcast provides an in-depth look at the latest industry trends in Arkansas from decision makers, business leaders, and executives. The Arkansas Inc. podcast has focused on a range of business and economic development topics, including small business and entrepreneurship, international business, fintech, workforce development, and community development. Each episode, which are about 30 minutes long, features business leaders and subject matter experts in conversation with knowledgeable members of the AEDC team. Recent guests have included Governor Asa Hutchinson, UAMS Chancellor Dr. Cam Patterson, Conductor Managing Director Dr. Jeff Standridge, and representatives from companies including Amazon, Walmart, IBM, Ozark Integrated Circuits, and more. The goal of the podcast is to help provide more information about Arkansas and its strong business environment to help business owners and executives make the decision to move to or expand in Arkansas. The Arkansas Inc. podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and other podcast apps. Just search for Arkansas Inc. To learn more or subscribe to Arkansas Inc. podcast, visit arkansasedc.com/podcast.
That's awesome.
Are there already some cool applications running on it where people are doing kind of classic SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition type of stuff? I mean, what's going on with it?
Yeah, so this is kind of a really exciting arena because, one of the hallmarks of this particular network is that it makes things smaller, lower powered, and then also more cost efficient. So it unlocks a whole new spectrum of devices that can be run and put in places that really didn't make sense to run over cellular networks, Wi-Fi networks, or anything like that. Some of those getting smaller, getting more efficient type of technologies are saving battery life. So that's some of the most interesting applications. If you don't need GPS to run something because you can locate your asset without having cellular GPS connectivity, and you're literally running over a low band sidewalk. Your batteries last longer. You can get those sensors really, really tiny and really, really cheap. So you could essentially deck out whatever you want with tracking or humidity sensors or temperature sensors, whether it's, setting up a deer camp or tracking your dog, or, testing the heat of your soil, for your rose garden. Just really anything you can think of. And a lot of these solutions can be implemented for under $20.
And it operates in the 900 megahertz band. Is that right?
That's right.
So you've got pretty good range with it.
Yes. And, not that we would actually rely on super, super long range to this extent, but we pinged a tower a couple of weeks ago over 1,100 miles away. Whoa. So the range is super, super long. But we have so many nodes and gateways in the area that you shouldn't have to necessarily go more than a mile without getting a choice of options. But up to a couple of miles, very, very reliably, up to 10 in most instances.
Very cool.
And how have you gone about onboarding those nodes and bringing on people to kind of host those hardwares or those? Have you created that network locally?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And one of the challenges, as an entrepreneur, a lot of times you're out there and you've got a pattern that you can recognize and a system that you can jump onto. If you're selling T-shirts or manufacturing widgets, you kind of have a system in place and an understanding for that. This is a completely new world. This is
blazing the trail. Huh?
Yeah. Blockchain, one of the characteristics of it is that the incentives are laterally baked in across the system. And so it's not necessarily a trickle down type of, resource oriented system. It's a very lateral distributed, not equally necessarily, but calculably across the system. And so, we don't really have a traditional business approach where we're charging customers. We actually kind of have a backwards approach where we pay our customers. So since the incentives are built in and don't have to be extracted, we're actually able to compensate our hosts on a monthly basis for their ability to support our hardware. So it is very much a host network. And we're compensated essentially by the blockchain, and we distribute that out over our host network in order to expedite and accelerate the adoption and deployment.
Are you earning HNT as you go along? Is that the
for the Helium network? All blockchain networks are paid in their native token as the compensation. So Bitcoin, back in the day, we were running our Bitcoin miners. We were being paid in Bitcoin. Same thing here as we deploy Helium equipment. That's where the compensation is built in through HNT.
And each of those nodes are like actively mining, right? Or is that technically the term for HNT or?
Yeah. So I guess technically it is mining. Mining essentially means that you're providing work for the blockchain. Each blockchain is going to have its own method of mining. For Bitcoin, it's commonly referred to as proof of work. Right now, you need pretty hefty equipment. You need GPUs. You need tons of compute power, and that will heat up a room or raise the power bill pretty significantly. And that's a particular type of mining. And the whole point of that mining is if somebody's putting in that many resources, that much work, that much compute power, and it's costing them that much, they're less likely to be a bad actor sacrificing all those resources for nefarious purposes. And so it's a proof of work that kind of transitions or translates into trust. And so with our blockchain, with the Helium blockchain, we need trust as well. But we don't run energy sucking hardware. It's not based off of GPUs. It's not based off of pure compute power. It's based off of proof of coverage. And that's a very unique proof mechanism, and it's specific to Helium. And I imagine a number of other blockchains will probably adopt this as time goes on. But each location that we have, it connects through radio frequency, through that 915 megahertz to essentially confirm encrypted messages to make sure that, hey, I am here. Other people are here and I'm here. And that's the language that all of these geographically distributed nodes provide. And so that's part of the proof mechanism needed in order to triangulate, particular locations and bypass GPS. So yes, technically it is mining, but I think that one of the things that we'll see over the next several years is mining, as we've known it, is going to be very, very diversified. The way that we do that is going to be extremely different than the commonly known methods today.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
And so is the game for you more about adding additional density in this area, or are you going to be looking to expand coverage into other areas? I mean, I'm old enough to remember AMPS cellular, which was analog cellular, for those of you that don't remember that. And the whole deal there was they rolled out an A carrier and a B carrier in every metropolitan area. And then there was all these rural service areas that were filled in over time. And they were assets, essentially. I know this is completely different because it's not hierarchical, it's decentralized. But what's the game really in terms of how you grow this thing?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. We're kind of an atypical business. We're developing kind of backwards, upside down business strategies in order to really experiment in this new space. The Helium blockchain is really just one of our projects.
Okay.
And currently, we've really only had the ability to deploy this IoT-based network. There are other spectrums within the space, 5G and 3G and Wi-Fi. There's other types of internet spectrums that we can get into as well that Helium supports. I think that's one of the powerful aspects of it is that it's actually spectrum agnostic. You can apply the same blockchain to all kinds of transmission bandwidths. So we are going to be looking at other types of internet essentially to deploy through the Helium ecosystem. We are pretty happy with the coverage that exists here in Northwest Arkansas. Of course, we're going to continue to expand kind of the fringe areas. But the most beautiful thing about this is we have so many people from this community in particular that have learned about what we're doing, and you can actually go do it on your own. A lot of the people who host for us, they'd rather not mess with all the technical stuff. They'd rather not mess with the crypto side of things. They'd rather just know that they're supporting the technology and helping their community. But we do have a large number of entrepreneurs in the area who are deploying their own coverage. We see that accelerating. So that takes a little bit of pressure off Mycelium. We brought the network here, and now it's kind of rolling downhill as a snowball, not downhill. Like in a bad way. Right. And it's getting stronger. More and more people are seeing that they can do it themselves. Now we will probably continue to deploy coverage and expand our host network, but we're focusing on other blockchains and we're focusing on bringing new networks to Northwest Arkansas. It's pretty incredible. This community is, I've talked about a number of times. The energy, the youth, just the openness to change and especially technology. And we have an incredible university here that's open to blockchain and really kind of ushering in this new world. And it really is our role and our commitment to bringing the next big network here as well. So we're kind of all across the board. On the back end, we're also, supporting the Helium network in other ways, not just here locally, but, we are also running validators, which is another type of proof mechanism that actually supports with a lot of compute power globally, all of the nodes globally. And so we're close to 1% of the total compute power that we provide from Northwest Arkansas for the entire globe, as well as kind of building some cool infrastructure applications. So we just want to build, we just want to bring more networks to Northwest Arkansas and, open up the space here. So we have a bunch of things in the pipeline.
On an ongoing basis, as you earn more H&T, you're converting that into actual USD dollars to be able to pay for the team and grow the team. Is that kind of how are you self-funding in that way, I guess?
Yeah. So a lot of people ask, how are we paying our bills? The most typical way of an organization to provide funding is to liquidate, liquidate crypto assets. It's a very unique blockchain. Helium is often considered a utility token, and a lot of times it's kind of like, well, we're building this network, but for what? You talked a little bit about the use case and the IoT applications. Well, I like to give this analogy. HNT itself is a utility. Think about oil. We extract oil out of the ground. We dig oil out of the ground. And that's kind of your HNT. That's your token. But we can't really use crude oil. It sits in barrels. We use it for trade. We use it for accounting, for reserves and different things like that. But you can't actually stick crude oil in much and get utility out of it. So we have to process it and convert it into gasoline. And when you do that, you actually burn off a portion of it and you can't go backwards. You can't go from gasoline back to crude oil. And HNT is the same way. If HNT is crude oil, DCs or data credits are the gasoline. And so in order to actually use the Helium network, your actual data, to run data over the network, to use it as a customer, to use it as a developer, you need data credits. The only way to get data credits is to convert HNT into those data credits. And so we're pulling crude oil out of the ground. We're converting them in a one-way method to gasoline in order to put that gasoline into our machines to pull out more crude oil.
Gotcha.
And so it's a self-sustaining system. And so we try not to sell our HNT if we don't have to, because what that allows for us is for us to power information on this network that we've been building for a long time. And we actually, about a month ago, we announced a $1 million Mycelium fund. And that's exactly what that is. It's $1 million worth of data credits to jumpstart applications and to jumpstart innovation on the network. And so whether it's students, businesses, entrepreneurs, first-time founders, anybody who wants to build on that network, we're trying to set aside as much as possible to make that barrier of entry just essentially go away.
That's great. Trying to catalyze the ecosystem by bringing others in to be creative and figure out new applications for it. Makes a lot of sense.
So 5 years ago, it'd be hard to predict any level of sophistication in this. What's 5 years from now look like for you in Mycelium?
That's tough. We're not even 2 years old yet. And we've got a pretty gnarly mission, which is just to accelerate the adoption of decentralized networks. And, I think that we'll still have a very, very big presence here in Northwest Arkansas. Hopefully we'll be supporting a number of networks and really leading this community in this space in adoption. It's not California, it's not New York, but we are Northwest Arkansas. And we've got this incredible platform. We've got an incredible host network. And a lot of our hosts, we talk to them all the time. They're really excited about what's going to happen next, what we're bringing next. So I fully expect us to be really a leading force when it comes to blockchain in the United States.
And are you native to Northwest Arkansas?
I moved here about 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
I'm native now.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever be.
You're an adopted son of Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah.
It happens to a lot of us.
Yeah. It's still a well-kept secret. I try to keep it that way.
Yeah. If you could roll the clock back to those first days when you were experimenting with Bitcoin and kind of getting into it, with all the accumulated knowledge you have now and all that experience, what would you tell your younger self? What kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, I think what I would say to my younger self, as well as to any entrepreneur, and I like to think of entrepreneurs, modern day entrepreneurs, as kind of the ancient explorers who would go out to sea. And what I would say is, your journey is going to be much, much more difficult than you could possibly ever imagine. But you're also much more capable than you could possibly ever imagine. And when you're out to sea and you're pushing and you're alone, and you don't know what to do next, and nobody's there to help you, and it's on you, and you feel like turning around, just remember that you are far more capable than you could possibly ever imagine.
Yeah, that's good advice, and so true. That's a good seafarer analogy. And the world is round, and you're not going to fall off the edge, right? We know that for a fact, and notwithstanding,
you're going to get somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So where can we have? It's a global show, really, 100,000 downloads in over 100 countries. Where can our audience find out more about Mycelium Networks? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you? Yeah,
we're doing some exciting things. I think the best way to keep in touch and to kind of see what's going on is go to myceliumnetworks.com. We also have a Discord. There's a link to the Discord there. If you're looking to get in touch with me or really get involved in any kind of way, whether you're in Northwest Arkansas or anywhere connected to the internet, really, hop in the Discord, and I'm always lurking in there. So myceliumnetworks.com.
Awesome. Rishi, you did a great job breaking down a very complex subject in a way that we could all understand it. That was excellent. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs, chambers of commerce, mayors, if you're interested in taking your economic future into your own hands, we've got a book that can help you. Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places is the guide. It's a little bit inspiration. It's a little bit toolkit
What it will allow you to do is take your economic future into your own hands and build a sustainable small business, innovation, and entrepreneurial ecosystem in your backyard. If you'd like to hear more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. The Startup Junkie podcast reaches over 100 countries and has had over 100,000 downloads. If you're interested in reaching some of the most motivated and engaged innovators and entrepreneurs on a worldwide basis, give us a shout.